dum diddy dum diddy dum.
Jones, Bowden. He's got it. England have won the World Cup by the barest of margins.
Stokes flashes it away through the covers for 4, and England have won the match.
Hello and welcome to the Analyst Inside Cricket Live, looking back at the first day's play in the Test match between England and New Zealand, of course, at Lord's. And Simon, it was a pretty good day for New Zealand generally.
Well, very good day for New Zealand. The only thing they didn't do today really was to really get away from England, but they built a solid base. I mean, this is the way they play. I mean, in a way, this is how England are trying to play. Build that solid base, build it up gradually, and then try to put pressure on England at the back end of the game. And that's what they did today. And it was Devon Conway's day, a player making his debut. Not only did he score 100 on debut, he's also scored the highest score by a debutant in a Lord's Test match, beating Sourav Ganguly's 131 back in 1996. Fantastic an effort from him today. So in a way, sort of ruthless decision by New Zealand to leave out Tom Blundell and bring Conway in, but they liked what they've seen of Conway in international cricket, white ball cricket, and also playing for Wellington. Scores stacks of runs for Wellington in domestic cricket in New Zealand. Straight in today. Must have been tough for Tom Blundell to miss out, because he's done well in his Test career so far. But Conway in, and he's just blunted England all day.
Yeah, I mean, both of us were working on BT during the winter, and I know I saw quite a lot of Devon Conway batting for New Zealand against, I think it was Bangladesh actually mostly. And I saw him then actually, and I just thought, this guy is exceptional. He's got that a very tight technique, but he's just got this hunger for runs, which so it seems that it's often quite a South African thing. I mean, Graham Smith was like it. Obviously, Jonathan Trott, who was born in South Africa, was like it. Andrew Strauss, actually, although he wasn't really South African, I suppose, but had South African parents, he had that. And also Kevin Peterson. So, it just doesn't want to give it up. He just looks like someone who wants to bat and bat and bat. Apparently, he hits thousands of balls in practice, and keeps the team bus waiting at the end of the practice session because he just wants to hit so many balls. He looked almost as fresh at the end as he looked at the beginning, and the record he has. Sometimes you can use statistics to back up something or predict something, and in this case, his 18 first-class hundreds in 100 matches, so one every 5 games. And some of those are massive scores as well. 327 in one game, a couple of double hundreds. Just looks like a guy who, actually, I played against Graham Hick quite a bit. Another, Zimbabwean rather than South African. But again, almost like the bat seemed an extension of his arms with Hick. And of course, he scored 100 hundreds, didn't actually really deliver in Test cricket, but was a superb first-class cricketer. And Conway looks like that as well. He looks like he's almost born with a bat, and the bat just sort of naturally is an extension of his arms, and he just gets into great positions. And we can show you the impact he's had today, because I've developed this graphic called "Who's Winning," which you can see obviously if you're watching this on video, but you won't be able to see on podcast. But I'll be able to explain it. And basically, it tells you the pattern of the day's play and the percentage chance of winning at any particular point. And from the graphic that today, at the start of play, obviously both teams roughly equal chance of winning. As soon as New Zealand won the toss, the percentage chance of New Zealand winning kind of went up, a few percent. So they were sort of at 45, and England were about 35%. And then you can actually see the key moments of the day, really. Kane Williamson's wicket, which at that point, England were 25% chance and New Zealand were about 40. But then Kane Williamson's wicket really sent the New Zealand situation into decline. And by the time that Ross Taylor was out, they were down at 35% chance of winning, and England had actually gone above them. The blue line of England had gone above the black line of the Kiwis. So actually, at that point, so halfway through the day when Ross Taylor was out, England were winning. They were on top, but it didn't last long. And that partnership between Conway and Henry Nicholls just ground England down, so that in the end, England's blue line plummeted down to only 12% chance of victory by the end of the match, or by the end of this day anyway. And New Zealand were up to nearly 50%. But interestingly, the draw percentage was also up to 40%, indicative of a very flat pitch.
Yeah, I mean, it is a decent pitch. I think we sensed that as well. The conditions leading up to the game were good for pitch preparation. And we've been very used to having Lord's pitches in the early 2000s, the first decade 2000s, where it was good for batting. And, almost as the game went on, it being flatter and flatter. And, you could see a situation where a team could chase down a big score in the last innings. Perhaps, who knows, perhaps it might happen in this test match. But it seems to me in the last sort of decade or so, the ball has done a bit more at Lord's. For whatever reason, and we've discussed it before. The drainage, you left more water on, trying to prevent it from getting really dry. Sometimes the floodlights have been on, the ball has swung. I don't know, the new stands have made a difference. All sorts of things. Anyway, but in this game, it feels like a good pitch for batting. Generally speaking, New Zealand have exploited that with the way they play. We saw them play like this, for example, say in Mount Maunganui, the last test but one that England played against them, where they just sort of ground England down. BJ Watling did it on that occasion, and it wasn't a spectacular day. And actually, your who's winning graphic today, Yoz, I mean, in a way, it's sort of, it's quite a straightforward one to put together, isn't it? Really, because there weren't that many fluctuations in the day. There was that moment when England got back in it, I think, with the Taylor wicket. But New Zealand fought back hard, and they've got a great base from which to build now. I mean, it's unspectacular days cricket. 246 for 3. You'd want a bit more, wouldn't you? Really, from the first day back, spectators here, 6,500 at Lord's today. You'd want a bit more from it. Nothing flashy at all. But it's the sort of day in which Test victories are built on. I'm not saying New Zealand are going to go on and win the game, but England have got this inexperienced batting lineup. New Zealand have got good variation in their bowling as well. The weather forecast is pretty good for 4 days. We'll see. I mean, there's going to be a challenge for England in that first innings to see whether they can respond with something significant against this New Zealand attack.
Definitely, I think this New Zealand team are very much in the mould of Kane Williamson, and obviously it's a wonderful player to be able to copy or emulate or whatever. But there's something about the way that Williamson defends the ball, which ultimately, of course, got him out today. The way he plays it so late, plays it with soft hands, the orthodoxy and total almost impregnability of his defence with really precise footwork, and the other batsmen really demonstrated that today. Conway, definitely. The opener, Tom Latham stuck it out for a while, got out, but he was looking really solid. Taylor looked pretty shaky. I think his Test career is sort of on its way out. But then Henry Nicholls as well batted at 140 balls for 46. There was real resolution. All their strike rates were around 30, except Conway. They were just absolutely determined to get stuck in. And it's how they play, isn't it? And of course, we've got Watling to come, who's probably almost an even better example of that. The way that Williamson defends the ball with the sort of the half a bat. I've got a bat here, actually. I've got a miniature bat, in fact. The sort of miniature bat it'd almost work as well, because he plays it like with the bat almost at more than 45-degree angle, so that the ball is just being completely snuffed out and will go straight down. But of course, ironically, it did cause his dismissal today, because he played a ball from Anderson very late, as usual, but it just bounced a little bit and hit higher up the bat than kind of it was ideal for him. And then it was a classic example of the slope having an unusual effect, because the ball ricocheted off the bat and bounced backwards, but would have missed the stumps. But the slope, because it was a ball from the pavilion end, just dragged it down into the off stump. So it was an unusual influence of the slope, but nevertheless, it was one. And it was a little sniff for England, with then Taylor getting out. But they just didn't. I think, to be fair to England, there just wasn't much in the pitch really, and the batting was hugely resolute and accomplished.
Yeah. How well do you think England bowled today? I mean, it was one of those days when, I mean, normally in a Test match day, there's a drop catch or 2 drop catches. When when it's 250 for 3, there's a drop catch or 2, and you look back, if anything, if only the fielding side had taken that moment, but they didn't. I mean, there were very few edges that went near slip fielders. Very few. There was a bit of playing and missing, but not a huge amount. And there was nothing sort of flashy from the batting side particularly as well. It was a sort of day of sort of like a flat line almost. There weren't those sort of fluctuations, highs and lows, and dramatic moments. But what about England's bowling today and their team selection as well? So no spinner. Joe Root did get one to spin. There was an appeal for a stumping that was the batsman just got his back behind the line, and that did turn. And it has been dry leading up to this game, last 4 or 5 days, and the forecast is good. No spinner for England, but they went with Wood, Anderson and Broad, and Ollie Robinson on his debut. So what about team selection, and what about the way England bowled?
Well, I'm always a little bit loath to play a team without a spinner, but in many ways it depends what the spinner or who the spinner is. And Jack Leach is a very honest bowler. I think he improved in India. But he's not going to bowl a side out on a flat pitch or a pitch with a little bit of turn. And I suppose also what might also have been a factor is that quite a lot of the top order of New Zealand are left-handed as well. 3 out of the top 5. So it's one of those things where you think the left arm spinner to left-handers isn't that effective, and plus the fact that Leach is not. He's not a gun bowler. If you had Graham Swan, available, you'd play him straight away because he's a class bowler, and also, of course, he's an off spinner, so he's spinning it away from those left-handers. But I can see why they didn't pick Leach, and I think actually looking at the way the ball is starting to sort of slightly scuff on this pitch, it might reverse swing later in the game, which will bring the likes of Wood and obviously Anderson particularly into the equation. So it doesn't worry me too much, actually. And I think today, England bowled pretty well. I think I was surprised that Anderson and Broad started at the ends they started at, because Anderson invariably starts at the pavilion end, swinging the ball against the slope, and he's so good at that. But for some reason, today he started the nursery end and Broad's up the other end. And they looked more effective when they were back at their traditional ends. Anderson got Williamson out from the pavilion end, where I think he should have started, and Broad looked good from the nursery end, where he's really worked out a way of bowling. He goes slightly wide of the crease, angles it in, gets the odd one to hold up, etc. So, and then the other guy, I thought Ollie Robinson did well. I thought he looked good, actually. He looked, he was accurate. He looked as if he was a guy who thought about how to get batsmen out, and he's well known as someone sort of analyses the batsman and thinks of ways of different strategies, which not all bowlers do, to be honest. And I thought he had good control, and I think he'll be a really good bowler for England. I'd like him to have a couple mile an hour more pace, but he looked like a sort of an emerging Josh Hazlewood or someone like that. Actually, somebody said Tim Bresnan. I was sitting today, I was at the game today for half of it, and I was sitting with Sam Mendes, actually, the film director, who's an absolute cricket nut. And he was remembering matches he'd seen at Lord's in the 1970s, actually, Viv Richards, 100 and so on. But he said Tim Bresnan, yeah. Ollie Robinson reminds me of Tim Bresnan. So I think England overall, I think they bowled pretty well. And Wood tried so hard. And for that reason, one of the things we're doing with this podcast is it's sponsored by the Test match sponsors LV Insurance. So it's the LV Insurance podcast each day covering the Test series. And they have announced there's going to be an In With Heart award, a With Heart award every day that we're going to give as part of their brand strategy. And Mark Wood, for me, showed the most heart today, undoubtedly. So he wins the With Heart award. I mean, he came in so hard. He bowled, I think, the fastest over that's ever been bowled by an England bowler since records were first, since all that stuff has been recorded for the first time. What was the average speed, Simon? Did you think?
In his first over, he hit Conway with a ball that was 94.7 miles per hour. So that was the sort of speed he was getting up to early on today. At this speed as the day went on, the speeds were down a little bit. He roared in. I think we should. I don't know if you want to say more about Wood, but we perhaps should move on to Ollie Robinson, because there was another aspect to Ollie Robinson's day today. Test debut, great day for him in one sense, and 2 wickets, 2 of the 3 to fall, getting rid of Latham, and then Ross Taylor. But then, middle of the afternoon, some historic tweets emerged of a racist and sexist nature that Robinson posted back in 2012, 2013. He's 27 now. He was 18 and 19 when he posted those tweets. And after play today, he spoke to the media, but before that, he read a statement in which he said that he was embarrassed I'll quote it, "I'm embarrassed by the racist and sexist tweets that I posted over 8 years ago, which have today become public, although actually, in fact, they were public. They're there. If you go back and scroll through, I don't know if they've been deleted by now. They haven't been made public today, but they've come to public attention today, I think is the way to say it. So he says, I'm embarrassed by them. He says, I'm sorry, and I've certainly learned my lesson today. Anyway, so there we go. So ultimately a very difficult day for Ollie Robinson.
It's hard, isn't it, as well? You're making your Test debut, and something like that comes to light. So excitement is rather dulled by anxiety, actually, and obviously regret as well. It's so difficult, isn't it? And when you're 18, you're not thinking I'm going to make my Test debut when I'm 24, and these things are going to surface. It is a warning, though, to just, I suppose, be careful what you do post. And I know you're very good at Uncle Simon Mann is very good at telling me, Simon Hughes, not to post certain things. You do need a guiding hand sometimes. I mean, Ollie Robinson's had a bit of a sort of checkered career initially, didn't he? He went from one county to another and fell out with a few coaches, and he does very much cite Jason Gillespie as someone who sort of got him back on track, and he's obviously a fine performer now. Of course, he's the stepson of Paul Farbrace, isn't he? The former England deputy coach. And I mean, he's got a feisty nature, which of course you want for a fast bowler. So I hope he can overcome this, because when you're 18, you shouldn't be judged by something necessarily that you did when you're 18, I think.
No, well, there is that aspect to it, but the other side of it is, even when you're 18 or 19, why are you posting this sort of material? Anyway, he's learned a pretty harsh lesson today. These things do come back, and it is a lesson for everybody, isn't it? About what you put on social media.
Well, it's like that thing that you always tell your kids, actually, not to sort of post too much kind of drunken pictures on Facebook or something, because I mean, employers look at them now, don't they? Employers look at your Facebook trail, and will pick up little clues about your personality when you're in job interviews and so on. So you're right. I mean, you shouldn't do it, but probably most of us, I know you haven't, but probably most of us have at some point.
Yeah, well, there we go. Harsh lesson, and you hope that not just he's understood your responsibility, whatever age you are, but I suppose it's a lesson for everyone as well. But I mean, you're right. But you don't know what's going to happen to your career. But for that very reason, you need to. I suppose it's about I mean, I don't want to get moralistic about it, but it's sort of about education. Really, is understanding the medium you're using. From whatever age you are using it. Anyway, there we go. That's what's happened today after the day's play.
Now, I want to give you a bit of credit for Bristol today. Bristol making their debut in the name of James Bracey, and I thought he did really well. I thought he kept. I mean, he's only kept in 16 first-class games. I think, is that right? And
he's not kept a lot.
No, and I thought I mean, going to Lords, never mind the fact that it's a Test match. Lords has always been a difficult place to keep because the ball swings after it goes past the bat and dips and all sorts. I think he was lucky today that there wasn't much swing, so he didn't have that horrible ball changing direction just as it's arriving. But he did well, and he nearly got a stumping, and he looked totally competent. I mean, he didn't look like he wasn't Jack Russell, but he looked good, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we didn't see him much with a turning ball. I mean, that's one thing you're judged against as a keeper. Ben Folkes, we saw him play in the winter with the turning ball in India, and he's an outstanding wicket keeper. Folks, and must be really so disappointed to miss out here, because this was his opportunity, and whatever happened in that dressing room, he slipped on a sock or whatever, did his hamstring, and so surprisingly James Bracey gets his chance, batting at 7, which is sort of bizarre as well, because he's essentially he's the top order batsman who keeps, really, isn't he? And he's been keeping for Gloucestershire this season because the keeper they had last year went off to Worcester, so he's got his opportunity to keep as well, and then suddenly he's thrust into a test match as a keeper and batting at 7. So I mean, it's going to be a sort of strange occasion for him when he comes out to bat. England will be hoping it's on Saturday rather than tomorrow down there at number 7. He's the first, if you want to be parochial about this, he's the first Bristolian to play Test cricket for England's men since 1989, and that was who? Yoz, can you remember the first 1989? He's actually here as the match referee. He's here as the match referee.
So it must be Chris Broad then.
Chris Broad, yeah, Chris Broad. He was born in Bristol, of course. Then moved. We think of him as being a Nottinghamshire player, but of course he started at Gloucestershire. Was born in Bristol. Went to Colston School. And then moved to Notts, and Stuart was born in Nottingham, so he's a sort of
I'm just dying for Stuart Broad to get crossing an appeal or some kind of DRS, and for his dad to have to fine him. I mean, wouldn't that be beautiful?
Well, the other thing, of course, is that Stuart is the vice captain. So if Joe Root got an injury, then you might have Chris Broad having to take action against the England captain, who's his son, or whatever. I don't know. Well, it was a slow over rate today, so you got that scenario. Anyway, so it's a COVID situation. Anyway, so James Bracey, first Bristolian since 1989. There were a few people on Twitter who sort of saying, "Oh, what about Sid Lawrence or other Gloucestershire players who played recently?" But Sid was born in Gloucester, so he doesn't count. John Lewis was born in Aylesbury. Mike Smith was born in Dewsbury in Yorkshire. Remember Mike Smith, who played that one Test match, and he had Matthew Elliott dropped by Graham Thorpe at slip, and he hardly made any, and he went on to make 190 or whatever and won Australia the Test match. But Jack Russell was born in Stroud. So before Chris Broad, you have to go back to the 60s. David Allen, 1966. John Mortimer, 1964. Arthur Milton in 1959. And names from the past who are
he was a footballer as well, wasn't he?
He was. Yeah, he played for Arsenal, Arthur Milton, and he also played for Bristol City as well. He might have played for the blue quarter of the city as well. I'm not sure about that. Anyway, so not many Bristolians to have played. Not in the last 50 years anyway. In fact, only 2 now in the last 55 years.
And just to continue that parochial theme for one more minute, interestingly, Dean Conway has spent a lot of time playing cricket in Somerset, hasn't he?
Devon Conway.
Sorry, I said Dean Conway, didn't I? Dean Conway was the England physio. Devon Conway. He went to Somerset Taunton Dean Club, following from, or being kind of incited, encouraged to go by his mentor, Jimmy Cook, who of course played for Somerset in the early 90s. Wow, he was a hell of a player. I mean, another South African who just wouldn't give it away. He just batted and batted and batted incredibly. And I felt the weight of his bat a few times, actually. And he induced Devon Conway to go down to play in Taunton. And then he played club cricket in Derbyshire, and he's been all over the place. I mean, he's a batting evangelist, I think, Devon Conway, and he's proved the value of being obsessed by batting today, hasn't he?
Well, he's waited his time. He had to qualify for New Zealand, but they sort of had their eye on him for a bit. Last time we were there, there was this talk of this guy Devon Conway. So I was 18 months ago when England lost that series 1-0 in New Zealand, and today was his day. So then, Yoz, first day, spectators back. First day of Test cricket of the summer. The sun shone. Lovely day in a way. The cricket could have been more thrilling, but it's sort of set things up nicely for New Zealand. How do you, just finally, how do you see this game now after the first day? And it feels as though England are under a bit of pressure.
I agree.
Potentially in this game.
Yeah, I think they are. I think, New Zealand, 240 odd. I mean, they need to get 450 to be really kind of sure. I think it's quite a hard pitch to score fast on. Yeah. It's not quite coming onto the bat. Yeah. And the outfield not quite as quick as in some years as well.
Definitely.
So I think 400, 450 will be the New Zealand target, and England will be under a lot of pressure. As our win graphic, who's winning graphic shows, at the moment, New Zealand are sort of 50% chance of winning and England are 12%. So that tells you the balance of power. What England need is for that new ball to do its work and keep New Zealand to sort of under 400. So and then they've got a hope of at least trying to draw level. But a lot of pressure with an unproven England batting order, or at least some quite inexperienced players, and a good bowling attack, good New Zealand bowling attack. I don't think that Santner, the left-arm spinner, is going to have a big impact. So it's going to be a lot of work.
He might not to start with, Yoz, but who knows?
Maybe later. Who
knows by the fifth day? That Test match that New Zealand won in Mount Maunganui, and this pitch is sort of a bit similar, really, sort of an attritional sort of pitch. Santner came into it on the final day, and he hasn't got a particularly stunning record. He's like a sort of batting spinner, really. Lends some power to that lower order, some cohesion to that lower order. But fifth day, I have seen the ball spin at Lords when it's been dry.
Yeah. Well, Moeen Ali has taken 5 wickets at Lords before.
Absolutely. So that's the source. That's the slight concern for England. But of course, New Zealand have got to get into that position first, where they are, where England are batting last, a long way behind, or chasing a lot of runs for victory in the final innings with time as well. Obviously, you might need some time. Anyway, who knows? The game can speed up sometimes. It looks like a 5-day game, doesn't it? Going the distance, but sometimes things can change very quickly in this game.
Now, what was it like in the commentary box today?
Well, it was
first time Lords back for the first time for a couple of years.
Yeah, it was the first time we've been in the commentary box here since the Ashes Test match, when Ben Stokes made 100 on the final day, and Australia was sort of clinging on at 154 for 6. That golden summer, really, when England won the World Cup as well. And the first wicket today, Tom Latham bowled by Robinson for 23, the first wicket in front of a crowd in England since Josh Hazlewood was dismissed by Leach in the last Ashes series, the last wicket of the Oval Test match in September 2019. Well, it was great to be here. I mean, I hope for more exciting, thrilling cricket in the next 3 or 4 days. But it might well continue to be attritional. England might have their work cut out to make something of this game. I mean, my one final point to make. I mean, it sounds like quite a pessimistic thought to end on, but my one thought this summer is New Zealand are a good side, and India are a very good side coming. Could really disrupt England's plans for the Ashes in the summer.
Because people getting dropped and things.
Good new ball bowling, undermining the top of England's order. So the challenge is there for the likes of Sibley and for Burns and for Crawley to get those first innings runs. And sort of, and build a strong case, really, build some confidence, really, during the summer, because it is going to be a challenging summer for England. And New Zealand are a good side, and they've shown that today. Albeit, if England had batted first today, they would have hoped to have been in a similar position after this first day. The conditions were in favour of the side batting first today.
Yeah. I must just say, I went to Lords this afternoon, and I just thought the new stand, which cost, 50 million, it looked worth it. It was empty because, or at least the top bits of it were empty because it actually wasn't quite ready after all this time. But it did look magnificent, and it really gave the feeling of specialness about Lords, because it kind of almost encloses that end. I was with the MCC chairman a bit today, Gerald Corbett, who's very sort of outspoken about the importance of the new stand, and it does really. It's the most important thing that the MCC have done, probably, in terms of the ground since the mound stand was built. So for like 40 years, and it really does add a special nature, and it just feels like it's a proper stadium now almost. It feels more like almost an amphitheatre, really, which is fantastic. And so, credit to all those who got involved. And although it wasn't a full house, it still felt like the home of cricket today. It felt really, really special, actually.
Some people can get some serious sunburn in that stand when the sun shines in the afternoon in the future. So if you come to Lords, you've got a ticket for the Upper Compton or Edrich, make sure you bring your sun cream, make sure you bring your sun hat, and make sure you bring your sunglasses. That's my closing tip.
Thanks, Dad. Thanks, Dad, for that. I know you always do worry about all our supporters, so your sympathy and warnings are well heard. We'll be back at this time tomorrow for a review of the second day's play in this LV Insurance Test Series between England and New Zealand. Hope you've enjoyed that, and thanks for listening, and we'll speak to you tomorrow.
Dum diddy dum diddy dum.